course is about economic and demographic challenges of social protection. And I wanted to give you some basic ideas about what the course is about and what we're doing in this course. The course basically has three major parts. The first part is to discuss about what social protection is about. So the question is, what is social protection and how does it look like, and what is its importance, and a question like this. The second part is about demography and demography impact of social protection. And the third part is on economics and economic impact on social protection. Let me start with the first part. We are discussing about the term of social protection and what social protection is to lay the ground for the later discussion. Social protection, by social protection we understand a system which consists of financial services, insurance, services and legal protection. Financial services is like microcredit, and insurance is like pension, health insurance, unemployment insurance. Services is like job brokerage and advice to people, and legal protection is like child protection. So I define the four branches of social protection. Social protection in our countries has a high empirical importance. It ranges from up to 30% of GDP in Germany and goes down to 22 or 24% like in the US and Japan. But it's always more than 20% of transfers, of pensions, of health insurance. So social protection has an enormous magnitude. We can find many examples of social protection in countries all around the world, even in developing countries. For example, you find in Nepal, you find a citizen allowance, which is an allowance that is paid to elderly people. You find cash transfers like in Mexico, oportunidades, and in Brazil. You find health insurance in many countries. Even in developing countries, social protection is gaining importance, and this is what we're all working for. Let me say also some words about the future perspective of social protection. We witness all around the world that countries get more and more aware that they need social protection in a financial crisis, that the financial crisis needs something to cushion its impacts. This is why people are looking for instruments of social protection they can implement and how they can protect their citizens. We see more and more, especially developing countries, doing that. The need for social protection is evident because many people fall into poverty, many people have a catastrophic illness, many people, or everybody gets old, and they all need some kind of help when they are in calamities and when they are in life situations where basically you need some protection. Let me say, last not least, when I talk about social protection, a word about affordability. Many people say, well, especially poor countries cannot afford social protection. It's not affordable. The ILO and myself and ADB proved that this is not true. The ILO made a study where they have shown that even with an expenditure of about 2% of GDP, you can afford major social protection schemes. And ADB has made an exercise in Asia where they screened social protection schemes all over the continent, and they found out that there is no correlation between wealth and quality of social protection. Even poor countries had social protection, and this, as an evidence taken, says that even poor countries can afford social protection. Now let me say some words about the second topic, the demography. In the course we talked about basic demographic indicators like growth rate, fertility rate, birth rate, replacement rate, which I don't need to explain now. These are defined terms. But what we did is that we looked at different country types, and we saw that demographic situations in countries are very different. You have some countries in Africa, for example, which have growing populations, and you have countries like China and other countries in Asia which are not growing that fast anymore and which have an aging problem. So growing countries have the problem that they have large masses of young people pushing into the labor market, and they need a certain amount of economic growth to absorb the growing population in the labor market and to bring about the economic background to have an existence for people. In aging population, the situation is different. There you have more and more people who are inactive and who need some support, which puts a stress on pension schemes and transfer schemes. You have different demographic effects in pensions, in healthcare and in labor market, and we discussed about this in detail. I cannot explain all this now, but it is very interesting to look at how different the impact of demography on these areas of social protection is. Finally, let me say a word about the economic topic we discussed. First, there is a micro and a macroeconomic perspective of social security. The microeconomic perspective is with everybody of us, because we shift, for example, expenditures of today to the future. We call this intrapersonal redistribution, because we do savings for our old age and we invest into pension schemes. Then we have macroeconomic interpersonal redistribution. This means that that funds are shifted between people. And this redistribution or risk pooling is a very important part of social protection and an economic phenomenon which we discussed in detail. Let me say that the economic importance of social protection is very big, as I said before. But what we discussed also is that even if there are no social protection schemes, like a pension scheme, like a health insurance scheme, and if we say that between 20 and 30% of GDP is spent for social protection, then we also can say that this is all the case also in countries which have no formal schemes, because in developing countries and in poor countries what happens is that the families have a transfer within them. That means that the younger family members support the older family members, that the whole family supports people who get old and get sick and have major illnesses. And if you take these transfers and sum them up with the formal transfers, then even in poor countries, the transfer and the social protection volume is not much smaller than in formal countries. That shows that social protection is independent of the system and the existing or formalized scheme, a very important instrument or a very important phenomenon. The difference, however, is that if you have formalized schemes, then people can rely on this, whereas a family member always can get sick and a family can fall apart, and so the reliability might not be the same as if you have formalized systems. Let me say one word about the impact of social security on demand and supply. Social security has a big impact on demand because the pensions that are paid and the cash that is paid constitutes demand. And it also has an impact on supply because it is costs of production, and people who pay for social security have to calculate this into their budgets. Finally, let me say that social protection expenditure has some built-in flexibility, because when you have a recession, well, social protection expenditure increases, and when you have a boom, social protection expenditure might decrease. So it is also contra-cyclic and helps to overcome economic crisis.